I had everything a person could dream of. At 45, I owned a beautiful house on the highest hill in the city. I had 3 expensive cars, a private office, several successful businesses, and more money in my bank accounts than I could spend in a lifetime. Every morning a driver waited for me outside my house. Every afternoon my assistant brought me coffee exactly the way I liked it, and every evening I returned to a house so large that my footsteps echoed through the empty rooms. People looked at me and thought I was lucky. Some called me successful. Others called me brilliant. My business partners respected me. My employees were afraid of me. My neighbors admired me. But nobody really knew me, and I myself had forgotten who I was. One Monday morning, I stood in front of the mirror. I adjusted my expensive tie and looked at my reflection. My face looked tired. There were dark circles under my eyes. My hair was beginning to turn gray. I stared at myself for a few seconds. Then my phone rang. "Mr. Carter, your car is ready," my assistant said. "Fine," I replied. I picked up my briefcase and walked downstairs. My enormous dining table could seat 12 people, but I always ate alone. A plate of breakfast was waiting for me. I sat down, looked at the food, and suddenly lost my appetite. My phone rang again. This time it was my daughter. I looked at the screen. The name said Emma. I hesitated. Then I answered. "Hello? Dad? Yes?" There was a short silence. "Are you coming tonight?" "Coming where?" "My birthday dinner." I closed my eyes. I had forgotten. "Oh," I said quietly. "Tonight?" "Yes, Dad, tonight." "I have an important meeting." Emma was silent. "You said that last year, too." "I'll make it up to you." "You always say that." I became irritated. "Emma, I'm busy. You know how my work is." "I know." Her voice sounded different, not angry, just tired. "Happy birthday," I said. "My birthday is tomorrow." I looked at my watch. "Oh." Another silence followed. "Goodbye, Dad." The call ended. I put my phone on the table. For some reason, I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt empty, but I pushed the feeling away. I stood up, picked up my briefcase, and walked outside. I had no idea that this ordinary Monday morning was the beginning of the biggest change of my life. I had started my first business when I was 24. At that time, I had almost nothing. I rented a tiny room. I had an old laptop. I worked 16 hours a day. I told myself that one day I would become rich. And I did. My first company became successful. Then I started another. Then another. Money came quickly. My small apartment became a large house. My old car became a luxury car. My simple clothes became expensive suits. My quiet dreams became bigger and bigger. But somewhere along the way, I had made a mistake. I started believing that money was the answer to everything. When I was 30, I told my wife, Sarah, "Once I make enough money, we'll travel the world." When I was 35, I said, "Just give me 2 more years, then I'll have more time for you." When I was 40, I said, "After this company becomes stable, I'll slow down." But the company never became stable. There was always another deal, another meeting, another problem, another $1 million to make. Sarah waited for years. Then one evening she packed a suitcase. I was sitting in my office. "I need to talk to you," she said. "Can it wait?" "No." I continued looking at my laptop. Sarah stood silently for a moment. Then she said, "I've been waiting for you for 10 years. I finally looked up. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I waited for the man I married to come home." "I'm here now." "No, Daniel, you're physically here." She looked at my desk. "But your mind is always somewhere else." I didn't know what to say. Sarah continued, "Emma misses you." "I provide everything she needs." Sarah shook her head. "She doesn't need another expensive gift." "What does she need?" "You." I laughed nervously. "Sarah, I'm doing all of this for our family." "No," she said softly. "You're doing it because you're afraid that if you stop working, you'll discover that you don't know how to be happy." Those words stayed in my mind, but I didn't admit it. Instead, I became defensive. "You don't understand what it takes to build something." Sarah looked at me sadly. "Maybe I don't." She picked up her suitcase. "But I understand what it feels like to lose someone while they're still alive." She left that night. I didn't stop her. I told myself she would come back. She never did. 5 years passed. My business became bigger. My bank account became larger. My house became more luxurious. But my family became smaller. Sarah moved to another city. Emma went to university. I sent her money every month. I bought her a new car when she graduated. I paid for her apartment. I sent expensive gifts on every birthday, but I rarely called. And when I did call, the conversations were short. "How are your studies?" "Fine." "Do you need money?" "No." "Okay, I have a meeting. We'll talk later." Later never came. One evening I returned home after a long day. I entered my living room. The room was beautiful. A large television covered one wall. There were expensive paintings everywhere. A huge sofa stood in the center. Everything looked perfect, but it felt dead. I turned on the television. The news was talking about wealthy businessmen. My own company appeared on the screen. Daniel Carter, one of the country's most successful entrepreneurs. I watched for a few seconds, then I turned the television off. I walked into the kitchen. There was food in the refrigerator. I didn't want it. I opened a bottle of water and stood beside the window. Outside, families were sitting together in small restaurants. Children were laughing. Couples were talking. Friends were sharing food. I watched them. For the first time, I realized something. I had a house, but I had no home. I had money, but I had nobody to spend my time with. I had hundreds of employees, but I had almost no one I could call a friend. I had thousands of contacts in my phone, but if I called them at midnight and said, "I need you," how many would actually come? I didn't know, and I was afraid to find out. The next morning, I received a phone call. It was from my doctor. "Mr. Carter, I'd like you to come to the hospital." I immediately became nervous. "Why?" "I'd rather discuss it with you in person." "Is it serious?" There was a pause. "We need to run some tests." I drove to the hospital. For the first time in many years, I wasn't thinking about business. I was thinking about my life. After several tests, the doctor entered the room. "Mr. Carter, you're under a lot of stress." I looked at him. "Is there something wrong?" "You need to change your lifestyle." "That's it." "You work too much. You don't sleep enough. You barely rest." I smiled. "I can handle it." The doctor didn't smile. You may be able to buy another company, another house, or another car. He paused. But you cannot buy more time. I looked down. The doctor continued. Your body is warning you. Please listen. I left the hospital that afternoon. I sat in my car for almost 20 minutes without starting the engine. The doctor's words kept repeating in my mind. You cannot buy more time. For the first time, I wondered how much time I had already wasted.
That evening, I decided to walk home. I didn't usually walk. My driver was waiting for me, but I said, "Go home." The driver looked confused. "Sir?" I said, "Go home." I started walking. After 20 minutes, I reached a small bus stop. An old man was sitting on the bench. His clothes were simple. His shoes were worn out. He held a small paper bag in his hands. I sat beside him. The old man looked at me and smiled. "Beautiful evening, isn't it?" I looked at the sky. "Yes." We sat quietly. Then the old man asked, "Are you waiting for someone?" "No." "Then why are you here?" I thought about the question. "I don't know." The old man smiled. "Sometimes not knowing is better than pretending to know everything." I laughed softly. "What do you mean?" The old man pointed toward the road. "I used to own a small shop." "What happened?" "I lost it." "That must have been difficult." It was. "Are you okay now?" The old man smiled. "I have enough." I looked at him. "Enough?" "Yes." The old man opened his paper bag. Inside were 2 apples and a sandwich. "This is my dinner." I felt uncomfortable. I looked at my expensive watch. The old man noticed. "Nice watch." "Thank you." "How much did it cost?" I told him. The old man laughed. "That's more than my house was worth." I smiled. "Maybe." The old man took a bite of his sandwich. Then he said, "But I have something you don't." I looked at him. "What?" The old man smiled. "A reason to look forward to tomorrow." I didn't answer. The bus arrived. The old man stood up. Before getting on, he turned around. "Young man, don't spend your whole life collecting things you cannot take with you." Then he disappeared into the bus. I stood there for a long time. I had never heard anyone speak to me like that. The next morning, I woke up early. I looked at the calendar. August 16, Emma's birthday. I picked up my phone. I wanted to call her, but I hesitated. What would I say? I had missed so many important moments. I finally pressed the call button. Emma answered after several rings. "Hello?" "Happy birthday." There was silence. "Thank you, Dad." "I was wondering—" I stopped. "What?" "Would you have dinner with me tonight?" Emma didn't answer immediately. "You want to have dinner?" "Yes." "Why?" I looked around my empty room. "Because I miss you." Emma was silent. I expected her to say no. Instead, she asked, "Are you serious?" "Yes." "Okay." I smiled. "I'll pick you up." "No." My smile disappeared. "I'll meet you there." "Okay." "One more thing, Dad." "Yes?" "Don't buy me anything." I looked at the expensive watch on my wrist. "Okay." That evening, I arrived at the restaurant early. I chose a quiet table. I checked my phone. Then I waited. 10 minutes later, Emma walked in. I stood up. She smiled awkwardly. "Hi, Dad." "Hi." We sat down. For a few moments, neither of us knew what to say. Finally, I spoke. "I'm sorry." Emma looked at me. For what? For missing your birthday. She smiled sadly. You missed more than my birthday. I nodded. I know. You missed my graduation. I know. You missed the day I got my first job. I know. You missed Mum's surgery. My face changed. I didn't know she needed surgery. I know. Silence filled the table. I looked down. I'm sorry. Emma looked at me for a long time. Then she said, I don't need you to be perfect, Dad. She took my hand. I just need you to be there. My eyes filled with tears. I held my daughter's hand. I will be. I will be. The next morning, I made a decision. I called my assistant. Cancel my meetings for today. All of them? Yes. Is everything okay? Everything is fine. Then I called my business partners. I told them I was going to reduce my working hours. Some of them were shocked. One even asked, Are you giving up? I smiled. No, I'm finally starting to live. I sold 2 of my cars. I sold my huge second house. I moved into a smaller home. My employees noticed the change. I started eating lunch with them. I began listening to their problems. I started leaving the office before sunset. I visited Emma. I called Sarah. At first, Sarah didn't answer. I tried again the next day. She finally picked up. Hello? Hi, Sarah. What do you want? I want to apologize. For what? For thinking money could replace everything. Sarah was quiet. I continued. I don't expect you to forgive me. Another silence. But I wanted you to know that I finally understand. Sarah sighed. You sound different. I feel different. We talked for almost an hour. It wasn't enough to repair 10 years of distance, but it was a beginning. Months passed. My life changed completely. I still had money. I still owned my company. I still lived comfortably. But money was no longer the center of my life. On weekends, I visited Emma. Sometimes we cooked together. Sometimes we walked in the park. Sometimes we sat and talked. I discovered something strange. The happiest moments of my life had almost nothing to do with money. One Sunday afternoon, Emma asked, Dad, are you happy? I thought about it. Then I smiled. Yes. Really? Really? Why? I looked at her. Because I finally understand what I have. Emma smiled. What do you have? I looked around. I saw my daughter. I saw the sunlight coming through the window. I heard laughter from the kitchen. And for the first time in many years, I felt at peace. I have enough. A year later, I returned to the bus stop where I had met the old man. I looked around. The bench was still there. I sat down. I waited. After a few minutes, a bus arrived. I looked at the passengers, but the old man wasn't there. I asked the driver, Do you know an elderly man who usually takes this bus? The driver thought for a moment. You mean Mr. Thomas? Yes. He hasn't taken this bus for months. Do you know where he is? The driver shook his head. I'm sorry, I don't. I looked at the empty seat. I remembered the old man's words. Don't spend your whole life collecting things you cannot take with you. I smiled. I finally understood. I had spent 20 years trying to become richer, but I had never asked myself what I was becoming in the process. I had gained money. I had lost time. I had gained success. I had lost relationships. I had gained possessions. I had lost peace. But now I knew something money had never taught me. A rich life is not measured by how much you own. It is measured by how much love, peace, kindness, and meaning you have in your life. I stood up. I walked away from the bus stop. This time, I wasn't walking toward another meeting. I was walking home, and for the first time, I knew exactly where home was. So, moral of the story, money can buy comfort, but it cannot buy time, love, friendship, or happiness. Don't wait until you lose something valuable to realize its worth. Spend time with the people you love. Be grateful for what you have. And remember, a person who has everything money can buy may still have nothing that truly matters.